like they're ready to pump this runway.
In front of their friends and family, the kids walked out to music they chose. Charnik, the punk-worshipping 14-year-old, chose the song Plump by Hole.
Next, from our Boulder group, we have Aura!
I guess I just try my best to be, confident, because the sort of punk spirit is I don't care what anyone thinks of me. And so I try to, embody that.
For some of the more reserved teens, walking the runway was an opportunity to shed their skin and embody their true selves. Here's Des Calnado.
My second one, I was in drag. And I think for me, when I'm in drag, I have much more confidence because it's a drag persona.
After about an hour, the runway lights turn off, the show ends, and the library goes back to feeling like a library. The teens are allowed to take their outfits home. For them, the world is a runway. For NPR News, I'm Paulo Shalceda in Boulder.
It's Morning Edition for NPR News. I'm Steve Inskeep.
And I'm Layla Falded.
And I'm Michael Hill. Marketplace Morning Report is next on WNYC. And then later on Morning Edition, mixed martial arts superstar Francis Ngannou is now known as the baddest man on the planet. But before he was able to chase his athletic dream, he had to make a harrowing journey out of his home in Cameroon.
You don't just wake up one day and leave your country without knowing where you're going, knowing that you're taking all the risks in the world. You might not come back alive.
He shares his story next hour. .68 and sunny out there this morning. Widespread haze today. Mostly sunny and 85 for a high. Mostly sunny and 85 tomorrow. Then Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, 50-50 chance of showers. Maybe some afternoon storms with a mix of sun and clouds and highs in the low 80s. Again, 68 and sunny at 6:51.
WNYC supporters include Mount Sinai. At Mount Sinai Spine, experts use the latest minimally invasive techniques to treat complex spine problems while minimizing pain and recovery time. Mount Sinai, we find a way. Find a doctor at mountsinai.org/spine.
On the next Brian Lehrer Show, with the ongoing threat of bad air quality days, maybe you've added the air quality index to temperature and the chance of rain for your daily check of the weather. We'll talk about how to understand today's air pollution and how to protect your health with Dr. Drew Kular from The New Yorker. Also, why are gay bars disappearing in many cities but growing in New York? The Brian Lehrer Show, weekdays at 10 a.m. on WNYC.
It's stress test season.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Fidelity. A dedicated Fidelity advisor can help create a wealth plan for a full financial picture. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. And by UiPath, providing organizations the UiPath AI-powered business automation platform. More at uipath.com/marketplace. UiPath, the foundation of innovation.
From Marketplace, I'm Sabri Benishore in for David Brancaccio. Every year, the Federal Reserve tests the nation's biggest banks to make sure they can withstand a major economic shock. And the results of the latest tests are in. The big banks, like Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase, did very well. These tests are of particular interest right now, given the series of regional but not that small bank failures just a few months ago. Marketplace's Nova Safo is here with more. Morning, Nova.
Good morning, Sabri.
So I guess that's not really a surprise, or shouldn't be a surprise, that the big banks passed their annual stress test. We would hope they would. But were there any surprises in these results?
Well, it is notable how well the banks did. This year's tests envisioned a pretty severe economic downturn. Commercial real estate values plunging 40%, house prices down 38%, the unemployment rate at 10%. That's pretty bad. And the test results showed that under that scenario, the biggest banks in the country would lose about $540 billion collectively, but that would still leave them with plenty of cash to conduct business and, importantly, keep lending. And that's important because banks lending keeps the economy functioning.
But not everyone was impressed by these results, apparently. Why is that?
Right. And if you look at the results, among the top performers was Credit Suisse USA. So that tells you something right there. The Swiss government had to engineer a takeover of that bank to keep it from failing. And there's a left-leaning Washington, D.C. advocacy group called Better Markets. They called the results the Fed's stressless stress tests. So that's pretty clever. Their argument is essentially that the Fed requires too little in cash reserves from big banks. And that considering the bank failures we just had a few months ago, it's hard to argue that everything is fine. So season the results, Sabri, with a big grain of salt.
All right. Marketplace's Nova Safo, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Virgin Galactic is set to launch its first commercial rocket plane spaceflight, the VSS Unity, today. The spacecraft launches from a high-altitude plane. This trip isn't tourism. It's being described as scientific. The crew plans to collect biometric data and conduct tests. But Virgin says it has a wait list of 800 customers hoping to experience a trip to space and back. The company is one of a handful of private firms, including SpaceX and Blue Origin, that are all working on space tourism. Here's Reuters space reporter Joey Roulette.
Virgin Galactic has done a few of these flights before, but this will be the first revenue-generating mission for the company and their first commercial mission. Right now, the company is charging $450,000 for tourists per seat.
That was Joey Roulette with Reuters. And let's do the numbers. The FTSE in London is down 0.2%. S&P, Dow, and NASDAQ futures are all up in the 3 to 0.4% range, where the Dow futures are up 92 points. The yield on the 10-year Treasury is 3.753%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Amazon Business. From small business to big enterprise and everything in between, Amazon Business helps simplify the supplies buying process. Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying. And by Forever Ago. It's a history show for the whole family. The podcast makes learning about the past fun while teaching listeners to think critically about history.
Pride Month in the U.S. is wrapping up. It does so at a time when LGBTQ rights have become particularly contentious. The Human Rights Campaign says 70 laws that it considers anti-LGBTQ have been enacted across the country so far this year. But culture wars aside, there is an economic case to be made for inclusivity. Lee Badgett is a professor of economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and makes that case in her book, The Economic Case for LGBT Equality, Why Fair and Equal Treatment Benefits Us All. Lee, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
At a macro level, you found that more inclusive policies for lesbian, gay, bisexual folks actually corresponds with higher GDP. Let me first ask, how strong is this connection?
It's strong. We see the correlation even after we control for all the other kinds of things that affect how well the economies do, and even taking into account how much gender equality there is. So in the context of countries overall, we found that having an extra law, being a little bit more legally inclusive, was worth roughly $2,000 in GDP per capita.
I think people may hear that and think, well, it's just because rich countries are more likely to be more inclusive, and that's all that is. Is that the case, or is there, a mechanism at work here?
I think that's partly the case, but there's clearly something else going on underneath it. When young LGBT people go to school, the most common thing they experience is bullying. And we know from research that that leads to lower GPAs. People are more likely to drop out or be absent from school. They're not as likely to go on to get university educations. So it's holding back their ability to develop human capital. That's, the skills, the knowledge, the creativity that economies rely on to grow. And then in the workplace, that kind of harassment and discrimination that's very common in every country that's ever been studied shows that that's a potential drain on productivity as well. So I think, thinking about how much those might look, if we could put monetary values on them, and I've tried to do that and some other people have done that, it still adds up to a big hit to GDP of about 1% or more in some countries.
It's interesting to look at that at the macro level, because at the more micro level, we have seen some examples where, for example, North Carolina had a bathroom bill. It was costly to that state. On the other hand, Bud Light tried to be more inclusive, and it cost them quite a bit of business. How does this translate to sort of the micro level?
Yeah, well, for North Carolina, it translated to billions of dollars in lost business opportunities. I think, the Bud Light example is a really interesting one. I think they weren't quite ready for what happened, and they hadn't thought through their marketing strategy very well, I think. Businesses are, I think, most of them are sticking with their policies of inclusion because they've worked for them. We know from research it's led to higher profits, higher stock prices, higher productivity when companies are more inclusive. So I don't think they're going to be going backwards either.
Lee Badgett is a professor of economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
In New York, I'm Sabri Benishore with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.